How do you do there? My name is Philip, and I am an astrologer here today talking for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency about the world economic shift of 2026. Oh my goodness, what a time to be alive. I'm very grateful to be a witness to this very dynamic and volatile change in economics that we're overlooking. Now, in the article which I've written for the CIA, I look at many different aspects of astrology that are playing out at this time and how this correlates to an economic 80-year debt cycle. So let's just overlay a few of those before we dive into the chart. We speak about how we're in a year of the fire horse. Yes, indeed. And in Chinese Tibetan astrology, we only have the same animal, which happens reoccurring every 12th, with the same element, which happens there's 5 elements. So 5 12 is 60. It takes 60 years for the same element and the same animal to reoccur. So the last time that we had a fiery horse was in 1966, which was around the time that we had a Great Depression. Fantastic time for art, fantastic time for creativity. But when it came down to economics and finance, it was a time of depression because of quantitative easing style printing of money. Lots of money being printed meant that it debased the currency as well as the times that we lived within. And so that was due to the need for lots of money to be printed after the Second World War, because in the Cold War, because we were rebuilding and cultivating these societies. And so that was interesting. So the last time that we had this debt bubble start to inflate was in 1946, 20 years prior to that, which is very interesting because we have a couple of other phenomena, astrological phenomena, that align with that. We know that 1946 was 80 years ago, and Uranus has an 84-year cycle. So it would have been that Uranus is in the same or similar signs 80 years ago as to which it was now, which are the signs of finance, Taurus, and the sign of marketing, Gemini. So very interesting that is. Not only that, but we know that war, like the Second World War and even the Cold War, which is a war on a different front, it's like a geopolitical type of war, a technological type of war. Those types of things, they're really about money, and money is what makes them tick, the wars. And so they're funded by like banks, and they're perpetuated to last longer so that more money can be printed, because there's other things going on a lot of the time. Not to be too woo-woo, not to dig into too many conspiracies here. So stick to the straight and narrow, looking at the points at hand with regards to the astrology. What I want to do is look at the scenario that I outlined in the article, talking about why they would have this debt bubble come to a cease point, and how they could even sense get a donor for the economic system, which is what I propose with regards to digital currency. I'm not proposing a digital currency. It's been forewarned for decades, and and before I was interested in astrology, which is almost 2 decades long now for me. And so I was quite aware that they would do like a one world currency, and like I got into those types of ideas of conspiracies, and they said, "Oh, we'll never have that," like my parents and that type of thing. But actually, we're moving more and more close to such a thing. Little did I know that the cryptocurrency is, in a sense, the door open to a one world currency and more digital infrastructure, the likes of which in the last year of the horse, they practiced in 2014 in China with a social credit score, which is a little bit scary and intimidating, because there's different rights that us humans have with regards to cash, fiat cash. We can do like a transaction, and nobody would know about it. You could buy an astrology reading from me, cash. Or you could buy it with a coffee or whatever it is, a few coffees maybe, and and at the end of the day, nobody would know about it because it's like a backstreet deal. if you will, and which is a private deal, and so it should be if we want to do that thing, those types of things. But if it's on an online ledger, even if it's said to be private and decentralized, there's always going to be some kind of fingerprint on the digital fingerprint of such a thing. And if we was to hand over full financial control to such technology, although there's lots of claims that it gives an equal playing field and a better opportunity to earn credit on our wealth, it could be that, if we, for instance, didn't follow the marching orders of the political people in charge at that time, for instance, if they had a lockdown for a pandemic or whatever it might be, excuse me, in my mouth, like wash it out and behind my ears. The point is that if we don't follow the rules and the regulations and the standards of the hierarchy, then in a sense you could get your penalised. Maybe it's not done the recycling, maybe we haven't done this, that, and the other, and so we can't go to certain restaurants. Is what they did for credit score in China. But if they cut off your bank with your digital credit and you didn't have a fiat cash or silver or something to back you up, then that's something that we want to be not in fear of, right? Okay, so all of those things aside, we know that in 2020 we had a build-up of planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn is the top-down world structures. In fact, Pluto had been there since 2008, and in 2017 Saturn came along, returned home, and joined Pluto. A couple of years later, 2019, Jupiter also came along into Capricorn. Very rare occurrence it is to have Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all in Capricorn at the same time. In fact, it was 735 years prior, in the year 1284, that the last time that they were all in Capricorn together. That's Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. My goodness, that's quite a lot of planets. In fact, it would be that Saturn and Jupiter were going to meet, but not until they get to 0 degrees of Aquarius, when they move out of Capricorn, which is going to be a whole year ordeal, which we will come to live through 2020. However, it would be early on in 2020 that Saturn would meet with Pluto. Oh yes, and in fact, that would be a 35-year cycle. On that very day, they had like this the pandemic kind of vibes kicking off as of January the 12th, 2020. And, it took a full year until December that it would be that Saturn would finally edge out of Capricorn, although it did do that and retrograde back in it. Jupiter was the one where it had to come along and meet with Saturn, and that would close out a 20-year cycle that began in Taurus, and that would be the end of what we would call the Earth trigons, because Saturn and Jupiter, for very much the most part, had only met in Earth signs every 20 years for the past 200 years, which gave rise to our Industrial Revolution. And yet now they're going to be meeting in only airy signs for the next 200 years, every 20 years. And the first time that they did that was December 21st, 2020, which was the date that the FCC, which is like the trading standards, if you will, of currencies in the United States, sued Ripple, which is a company which is really high up in the banking order, if you will, at this point, because they weren't a bank, but they were being prosecuted for basically trading as a banking entity and that type of thing, and using the XRP ledger, which is this really fast technology that allows you to transfer wealth within a matter of moments across the world at a very low fee, whereas the greatest technology which you can use to do that in the current day and age up until this point would have been Swift, which would take 3 to 5 working days. So it could be waiting like 10 days, couple of weeks for your cash to move across the world, which is all very well. I mean, I've been annoyed waiting for that for a payment to come through the website, and you go, well, has it come through? Oh, we've got a weekend to go yet. Oh my goodness. And so it's very necessary that we move forward and update our banking system. And the XRP ledger certainly proves that, but yet many of the banking cartels and those types of people wanted to hold back this fine technology because it would actually take away their profit margin. And so it's interesting that these things have been going on in the background, and yet they've been tried to poo-poo them, but tried to give them hogwash, tried to give them trials and tribulations, literally in the court case, that would keep them round up in debates for half of a decade. It was only in September 2025, upon what would be the Jupiter return of Ripple Labs, because they got Jupiter in Cancer. I haven't got the chart for this video for that, but it's actually their Jupiter return is ongoing. They had 3 returns because Jupiter went forward on it and it's retrograde on it, and now it's having the 3rd one around this springtime. Very interesting. I will be sharing the chart of the XRP coin, the technology, as we move through this little story time that I'm sharing with you. Thank you for your presence. I'm grateful. Thanks for sharing the video. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for following the links. I'm really passionate about astrology and really passionate about this topic, and it's a right pleasure to share with you. And so just to continue on and wrap it in a bow before I do share the chart. Yeah, this technology, they do pose themselves as white knights, these Ripple people, and they seem to be pretty fantastic, if you ask me. But it's good to be discerning. And when you don't know, and there's a lot of kind of riddles out there, what discernment is key, and trust within ourselves is key, because that's really where banking terminology comes from. It's about spiritual economics, and the trust is actually within ourselves. Trust is very similar to love. It's like, if you trust yourself, if you love yourself, then you can do a whole lot of things. And so let's move back into the territory of the banking. So yeah, they were sued, Ripple were, for a long time. But in 2020, we had that big pile up, and it ended at the end of 2020. But we had to have many conjunctions of Pluto. Jupiter met with Pluto in Capricorn. That's a 13-year cycle. Saturn met with Pluto in Capricorn. That's a 35-year cycle. And so we're in very powerful cycles with regards to the change of the infrastructure. In fact, that 35-year cycle just this week is getting to an opening sextile, which is a bit similar to an opening crescent of a phase of a cycle between 2 planets. And it's like the kindling of a new beginning, which is starting to take place right now. And so we still currently have Pluto in Aquarius, and we have Saturn in Aries now. It's moved all the way into Aries, another cardinal fire sign with new initiatives. So if something new is going to start, you'd think it's going to be starting when Saturn's in Aries. And yeah, Aries is the new kid off the blockchain technology. Excuse me, that was a bit of a pun. But like, it's the new kid on the block, and Saturn is the block. And so the interesting thing is that even if you start something with the best of intentions and you're very well educated and formatted and even disciplined in your practice, you're going to be a little bit naive if it's never been done before. And it's by making a few mistakes and by putting it all out there in the first place that gives you the opportunity to be naive, to see where you are making mistakes, to see where you can make alterations and shift that into a different narrative. And we learn through that kind of situation. We have to fall on your face a few times. Give you a good example. If you're learning a new language, whether it's Spanish, French, or even astrology, to become truly fluent in it, you have to practice it so much that you fall on your face countless times and make a right boob of yourself. But in doing that, whether it's dancing or anything, guitar, drums, whatever it is, if you're willing to make lots of mistakes and just put it out there, then you're going to be making good progress at some point down the line. And so what I'm saying is, I expect that there is going to be some naiveties in the adoption of this technology. And yet in this endeavor, it's going to be that the first foot is pushed forward, and we're going to make some progress in this direction this year, in the year of the fiery horse. It's a year of adaptation. It's a year of new initiatives. And with Saturn now in Aries, moving away from Neptune, the mysticism of these subjects is becoming less and less, and clarity seems to be ringing more clear. So with that endeavor, we can open to see that there's going to have Jupiter join Saturn in fiery signs this year. And that's going to be taking place in the spring. But I want to look at the transits to the chart of the XRP ledger we're going to bring it up on the screen, and I've actually got it ready on a particular date in April. Yeah, this is due to be released in April, this video, this article, and I've just kind of stumbled across this transit which is taking place of Saturn in a conjunction with Mars in Aries, as well as Mercury right behind it in the wings. And so it's a very powerful combination of energies, but it's actually taking place on top of the Uranus of the XRP ledger, which for me feels like a massive activation. So without further ado, let's take a look at the chart, shall we? So here we go. We've got a double wheel, a tri-wheel for you here, a bi-wheel, excuse me. And on the inner chart, what we got is the chart of the XRP ledger. XRP is the token, the cryptocurrency that has 100 billion tokens, and it's all about liquidity. And so this is like a donut, as I previously said and alluded to. There's a lot to contain in explaining this. So if there is a lot of blocked finance in the world due to the SWIFT accounts, which takes ages to move large sums of money around, it's because everybody across the world has to have their money backed and have large amounts of money held in vaults, which is stagnant, a bit like Plutonian stagnation. Dams are caused by stagnation, whether it's emotional dams or even blood clots. And so for the liquidity to move that money around, you need to have trust in a new system, and the digital currency provides, in a sense, a complete mirror, a next dimension of liquidity that can free up the need or the necessity to have all of that stuck gold or cash in vaults of various different ports and banks across the world. And so utilizing this technology, which has been practiced for quite some time by the Bank of England, by the when it used to be run by the current Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. Yes, they practiced using the XRP ledger with Ripple since 2017 publicly, and lots of different people in Japan, different countries, are also practicing using the same technology. So it's all very interesting. It's basically been waiting in the wings as a solution to this world debt crisis for quite some time, a bit like how they created Bitcoin in 2008. The pattern for the XRP ledger was back in 1988, which was around the time that we had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. We just had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries at 0 degrees. As you can see by this chart, we've got Neptune at 3 degrees of Aries, whereas Saturn has now moved on to the 7th degree. The transit's on the outside wheel, where we have the XRP ledger on the inside wheel. XRP ledger was created on the 2nd of, well, the XRP token was created on the 2nd of June 2012. As I said, the ledger, or the pattern for the ledger, was in 1988. And so, very interesting, just looking at the inside wheel for a start. We don't have the exact time for it, but we can see that the moon would have been in Scorpio, and the sun is in Gemini. We also have Mercury in Gemini, as well as Venus retrograde in Gemini, and the South Node in Gemini. Gemini is the sign of markets and trade and transactions. So that's very interesting that we would have interesting combination. It's almost like there's a lot of wisdom, and it's unforeseen in the creativity that can be a valuable asset of this transaction technology. With regards to Venus retrograde, it's a bit of a journey of this kind of awakening to its value. It's a bit of a process. Very interestingly, the North Node being in Sagittarius there, which means that, to me, it means that there's a lot of expansion in the world for this technology, or for this original idea. I know that the people who invented it were surprised that it's come this far. This is like a mad dream come true. They invented something that is actually now being potentially adopted by the biggest banks in the world, even though that was the plan for it actually to take off, is a really big deal. So let's just look at that. The Uranus in Aries is like, okay, well, Uranus is like the Prometheus. It's the new idea. It's ahead of its time, and so but you need a catalyst to bring it in. Like a war, excuse me, or something. And Uranus is in the sign of new things, Aries. Interestingly enough, we have the most malefic conjunction of them all, Saturn and Mars, taking place here on the 18th, 19th of April, which is the first day of Taurus. So we're going to have the Sun leave Aries and go into Taurus, the sign of finance, just as we have Mars met with Saturn. In fact, it happens that Mars meets with Saturn just hours before the Sun leaves Aries for Taurus. So it's a bit like a big activation. Who's to say what kind of activation it is? It could even be the potential of technological market crash. But it also could be an activation of this technology, because we see that there is the Saturn-Mars conjunction taking place on top of the Uranus of XRP. Not only that, if we just forward the chart on a little bit, the Sun goes into Taurus. We've got the Moon over here going over the south node of the XRP at the time of that conjunction. And then, as the Moon cracks on to meet with the Sun of XRP, we have Mercury meeting with Saturn and making that conjunction with the natal Uranus of XRP. Very interesting. All of that is also sextile Pluto here in Aquarius. If we actually go back just a little bit, we can see that it was around the end of the very beginning of April that we had, and the end of March, the beginning of April, that we had the sextile between Saturn here 5 degrees and Pluto here 5 degrees of that 35-year cycle that began at 22 degrees of Capricorn on January 12, 2020. So this is an opening the door, opening for the potential of what we're going to grow into. And I feel that this is a very potent time indeed for this asset. But we can also see the loomingly obvious big deal that the transit Uranus has been on top of the Jupiter in Taurus of the XRP coin, the token, the asset, the utility. And we know that Uranus is going to go into Gemini for keeps for the next 7 years. So we're actually having a grand completion of Uranus in Taurus. Venus is going to swing along over the course of these next few weeks as we move through into the deeper into April, and we have Venus actually meet with Uranus at 29 degrees of Taurus. So the last cycle is a bit like chiming in on this symbolic, because the conjunction does take place in Taurus before Uranus can leave. And so that's very interesting. That took place on the 23rd of April or thereabouts, before Venus will then go into Gemini just a day or so before Uranus does. So that makes for a very interesting signification to have Venus and Uranus meet in Taurus, making the next time that they meet being Gemini, but not until about a year's time. Okay. As I said, it's a couple of days after that we actually have Uranus go into Gemini on April the 25th, and it's going to be there for 7 years. And so what's really powerful about this, which I can point out, which I had been going on for a little while, is going on as I record this video, and that is that Pluto is trine the south node of Gemini. This has been on off for the past couple of years. It's the south node in Gemini of XRP, and it's sextile the north node. So there's this massive transition of letting go of past identities, past notions, and bringing them forward to broaden this story, if you will. And this is only going to get accentuated by Uranus back in Gemini now, but it's actually going to move forward to the point that it does make a conjunction with the south node of the XRP utility coin. So let's just have a look when that might be before Uranus goes retrograde. And it's going to be July, yes, July kind of time, which is around the time that we have the first perfection of the trine between Pluto and Uranus. I did do a video about that for this Cosmic Intelligence Agency on this YouTube channel. There's 5 perfections between Uranus and Pluto between 2026 and 2030. Because they come in and out of orb. But this is the first one of 5 perfections. These are very radical and transformative kind of energies. They're transpersonal planets that affect entire generations at a time. It was that Pluto and Uranus were together in the mid-60s in Virgo when they had a conjunction, and this is them growing apart to 120 degrees, with Uranus being the faster moving at an 84-year cycle, whereas Pluto is a 246-year cycle, so about 200 years, well, almost 200 years longer than Uranus. And so it's very interesting. And so Uranus is Prometheus, like giving something that is kind of ahead of its time, really about the future, genius kind of perspective. And Pluto is more like the hidden thing, the deception, the heavy thing, the forgotten thing, the shadow. And so there's this shadow to the future. There's this hidden nature to the planned future of the world. It could be said, one way to look at it, you could say that there is a lot of empowerment that can be made through innovation. Okay, there's very different ways to look at it. But what's very interesting about this time, as we look through July of 2026, is that we've had Jupiter make ingress into Leo, and it is making an opposition with Pluto. This is an aspect which you'll have once every 12 years. And before that, Jupiter can leave Cancer, it's sign of exaltation. It makes a sextile to the natal Jupiter of XRP, which is at 27 degrees, 28 degrees Taurus. And so that's a really interesting, powerful, fortunate kind of opening aspect that you'll have at the end of June as we move into July, right? Yeah, and then it's in July that we have the opposition from Jupiter to Pluto. I think it's going to be a really powerful roller coaster ride throughout the year of 2026, this year of the horse. But to have this, all of these kind of symbolic crescendos taking place at a similar time is very interesting. So we see that the Saturn of the XRP ledger, XRP the token, excuse me, was actually in Libra retrograde at 23, 24 degrees. That's Saturn's favorite sign of exaltation, a fantastic position for Saturn. And it's had Chiron opposite it for the past couple of years, which has again been healing as we finish the end of this court case endeavor that's been going on for Ripple, which is the company that use the XRP ledger and token. It will be that Saturn retrogrades back after this point from 14 degrees or so of Aries for a few months, going back to earlier degrees of Aries. But as we can see, it would be next year, that by May, spring 2027, that we'll have the Saturn opposition. It will be 14 years after the creation of this utility, XRP. And so to have the Saturn opposition is like a real coming to maturity kind of aspect. But what's really great about this time is that also we're going to have Jupiter at the latter degrees of Leo, and it's going to be trine Jupiter. So we had Saturn trine Jupiter in when Saturn was in Pisces and Jupiter was in Cancer, just a little bit, and watery signs. But each time it happened, either Saturn or either Jupiter were retrograde. But this time, we have it in fire signs, so it's so much more combustible, and it's like, this is go time, this is launch time, July 2027. This is a fantastic time for progress. I don't want to overshoot the mark. I don't know when adoption is going to take place. This is the next year. It's just something that I've noticed that's jolly exciting. It's actually taking place at the opening square of the Jupiter cycle of XRP. So I just thought we'd have a little look at the transits of this XRP token, show you that the chart is very interesting and the transits apply in a way which the narrative fits. And so, with the economic debt bubble due to burst, with all the synchronicities aligning in a way which is profound because it's almost like a pre-written script. Not only that, with a recurrent nova known as the Blaze Star, due to go off this year. The last time it went off was 80 years ago, and it goes off every 80 years in a recurrent cycle, taking place around 20 degrees of Scorpio, known as the Blaze Star, can rival Polaris for brightness for a couple of weeks when this recurrent nova takes place, an omen the likes of which can see such change in the infrastructures of the world that it can send a tidal waves that ripples out for eternities. I'm just a poet, but we already knew that. Janky is the way sometimes, but yeah, it's always from the heart. Intending that you enjoyed this video presentation. My name's Philip. I'd love to connect with you. If you got curiosities to explore astrology with me, do get in contact via the links. And hold on to your hats throughout this year of the horse. Hold on to your hats throughout this economic digital switchover. Discernment is key, but trust, well, that's within you, see. Lots of love to you. Cheerio for now.